So next we'll talk about the assessor training course and how that's working. Mary Goya is going to come up and talk about that.
Yeah, so as Cara mentioned, the Department of Labor and Advanced Education, they enlisted the NSCC to work with them on the pilot project and to create a training course. It was identified really in the previous pilots that there was a need for more training, more tools, and more supports. And so it was decided that we would look at a blended learning course, which is something that occurs a lot within the NSCC, which is there's some face-to-face and there's some which occurs online. For this pilot and with the amount of people that are across the province participating in it, we wanted to really minimize the amount of travel time, so there's no overnights, and really kind of minimize the disruption to their work schedules. So we created kind of regional groups for the face-to-face training sessions, which they did for camera and ESAT tool training, which the assessors will talk about after this. And all of the other training took place on the D2L system, which the NSCC uses. It's an online training system. So we began the project really with draft kind of learning outcomes for this course, developing the content through the progression of the course. And in this way, the curriculum development was really informing the whole process of the ROA, which we all know is still the process in development, the tools in development, the framework. So it's all very developmental. And this led to issues of time needed to complete the training and the course activities. And, really the time commitment was underestimated. And as Cara alluded to, there were some revisions in the length and the scope of the training program. So we did scale back on some of that. So I just want to introduce you a bit to the online learning system, if you could move the next slide. So basically the online learning system is through the NSCC website. You just log in, username, and password. This having different organizations who were specifically registered as students of NSCC had a few glitches in it itself, but we made through that, and we got through that part. The next slide actually shows you, once you log in, this is kind of what your homepage will look like. And in this, it gives us an opportunity to see a calendar. You'll see we're getting to the end of the course. The course is going to end April 30th with our last session. And there's places for news, so we can keep up on what we're doing. The next, sorry, to keep up. Yeah. So basically, this is what, getting into more of what the course consisted of. You look at when the assessors go into their content, they'll come up with a table of contents. So each unit, which we broke down by learning outcome, of what we wanted them to accomplish in each unit. And from there, we can see that each unit was divided into a unit overview, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute, but that would give them what the expectations were for that specific unit and what readings there were. Then there would be assignments. There was places for discussion. So this discussion board, this was a very important part of this course. Creating the community of support with the assessors, many of them using this tool outside of the mandated discussion activities, just to go back and forth. And, being separated by that large distance and being from different organizations, being able to have that community of support was good. The quiz, there's a quiz feature. that was identified as a kind of appropriate tool for collecting some information on the framework. As Cara said, the framework is really, you know, being validated through this process in respect. That this would give participants an opportunity to look at some tasks and, you know, kind of determine what skill levels they were at. But it was a way to really collect data. So in that case, you know, when people heard quiz, they think right, wrong answers, and there weren't. So it may not have been the best thing, but, you know, this use of this system, for me, it was the first time to use this system. And I think even for the college, it's pretty new. So a lot of the assessors were not familiar with it at all. And then Dropbox, as we see at the bottom, they did learning journals and other documentation that could be uploaded. So I'll just show you the next slide, is just give you an idea of basically what they were asked to do. You know, I think we tried to be very considerate of the time. We know that adult educators are always trying to pack in a lot into their schedules, and they spend a lot of time with their learners. So we tried to keep as much as possible down to what was, you know, necessary information. So whether it was readings or online conferencing time, which we did about once every unit, once or twice every unit, we would do an online kind of conferencing just to introduce the topics. And it was also a way to, there could be some interaction as well, even though we were separated by distance. The learning journals, as I mentioned, you know, they were created as a template, and one of the things with this project, as Cara said, is really about us, you know, getting information from assessors about, you know, the process. Is the process appropriate? Are the tools appropriate? How, you know, are the learners during the process? So gathering all that information, the learning journal was a way to have assessors, you know, reflect, and for me as a facilitator to be able to, you know, kind of see what was happening, but also for them to be able to, you know, write down the experience at the moment. When we're looking at a course that, you know, began the first part of January and it'll end the end of April, you know, I think it's always good to have those, you know, experiences fresh in your mind. So when they were, you know, training for their tools, and then they were going and they were using the tools with the learner and assessing the learners. So to get that moment, and, you know, hopefully, as Cara said, the moderation session will be June 1st, and prior to that, assessors will have an opportunity to do some evaluation surveys on the different tools and how they worked. And then the moderation session will really be an opportunity for the ROA project team to hear firsthand, you know, the feedback and how everything went in the various areas. You know, I think with this project being very developmental, it was hard to, like Cara said, it's hard to anticipate a lot of things in the, you know, in the beginning as we got into the processes. Again, the time commitment, how long that would take, the time with the assessors. But this has been a, you know, a really great learning process, and I think as we heard from the, you know, the stories of learners who could really benefit from this, I think this is just going to help us moving forward.
Thanks. So we've learned about the ROA Assessor Training course. Mary's done a great job delivering that, and Jennifer Archer as well, helping out. We're all kind of working together to roll that course out. And we have the assessors that participated in the pilot were trained to assess learners with some evaluation tools that we brought into the pilot. Both Camera and ESAT. Camera is a communications and math employment readiness assessment, and ESAT, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Paul Brinker's here from FutureWorks helped us on that tool. And ESAT is the employability skills assessment tool. And as well, we have the LAE locally developed numeracy tool. So a numeracy tool that was developed in-house by David Comer, a person I'm sure you're familiar with. And then we have some RPL, recognition of prior learning tools that were developed as well by Meredith Hutchings, and they're really interesting. And we didn't have a chance to really get down and to use the RPL tools with learners. We felt like we wanted to take a look at how we could use them amongst ourselves and kind of examine the structured conversations that were developed with those, but still they were part of the assessor training course. It's important to note too that Camera and ESAT are both tools that are used in different contexts, of course, other than the ROA pilot project. So we're only looking at these tools in the context of the ROA pilot project. And each of the assessors is going to talk about the tools that we're using. So if we could talk about the first tool, and that's Camera.
I feel kind of odd because Paul trained us in camera as well, and I feel he should be the one talking about the camera process. But anyway, it was, as Cara explained, these are tools that have existed outside of the realm of our ROA project, and we're kind of piloting to see how applicable they are and if we can extract the information we need and lay it into the Nessus and see if the employability skills flush themselves out for us on the wheel that we're looking to work with. And so, as Cara indicated, the camera training, or the camera stands for Communications and Math Employment Readiness Assessment. And it was developed by, well, it says it's PTP, which is actually Pathway to Possibilities, Adult Learning and Employment Programs. And the main things that it's looking at is it's looking at reading, document use, writing, and numeracy. And you'll note I said numeracy because some of the other assessments as well that we've worked with also include numeracy. It tends to be a big focus. And so it's really neat because what they have, the way it's designed, there are two, has anybody worked with camera already? Yeah. So there are two levels with the camera. There are two types of assessments. One is the initial placement assessment. And so what we do is we sit with the learner in a room. Oh, well, we have another slide. Yay! Well, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. That's right. And I brought the real live hard copies too, and they match up color for color. But we sit in the room with the learner, and we are very much, because it's a standardized assessment, we have to make sure that we apply that in a standardized method so that we're not interpreting questions or asks of the assessment for the learner. Everybody gets the similar kind of introduction to the assessment, and this is what we're asking you to do, and so we're really careful to do that. Out of the placement comes a little bit of interaction with ourselves and the learner, in that we're saying, these are some of the questions that we're going to be working through, and you guide them through the first couple, and then here's your response booklet, and you kind of work through these questions on your own, let me know, and you kind of guide them each question, so that you're actually setting the tone for a learner, because it can be kind of daunting. They think, oh, assessment, oh, test, is this a pass-fail? Is it, they kind of get anxious about that. And so really it's about establishing a good rapport with the learner and doing that in such a way that you're communicating, in a way that mirrors them. Like, I'm kind of excitable all the time, and so I have to be really kind of more quiet and a little bit more introspective and introverted when I work with the assessment. So that's a challenge for me. And my challenge is also to not run in a rescue, to kind of say, oh, you didn't understand that? Well, but you have to be really careful not to do that. So that's one of the things I learned as well. And Paul was really clear about that. You have to give this is the script, and it comes with an assessor guide for those of you who haven't worked with it. So you really, you get your training initially with Paul, and then you get the backup training because you go through the guide. So you guide the learner through the first part, which is a placement. And out of that placement, we get to score that in such a way that it indicates whether it's a level 1, a level 2, or level 3. And so the second part of the assessment is that there are we are actually given 2 different booklets to work with level 1, 2 different booklets to work with 2, and 2 different booklets to work with 3. And this allows us to be able to, for our purposes, we assess people at a certain point in time in our project. And then, however, what the whole goal of the camera is to be able to kind of help you design programming that might be necessary for that learner, given where their gaps are evident. And so the placement tells us what level they're at, and mostly it works out to be level 1 is a bit of considered a low level of literacy, level 2 is considered a medium level of literacy, and level 3 is equivalent to a higher level of literacy. Some people it's quite evident, depending on the population of learners that you're working with, that they're going to be doing level 3 right away. You can see that, and there's a kind of a score kind of rate if they score after, over 80 or 83, I forget, and then you kind of move into the 3. So we've been trained on that. And so what that means is that then they go on and they do the second part of the assessment, which is either chosen by you, the assessor, to meet the level of ability that you feel is most comfortable for that learner. Now the neat thing about it is that if you're using it to fill in gaps and present them into a program that might be their area of need, it's neat because then you can go back and use maybe the booklet B for them at that same level to see if they've increased their ability. So you can go back and reassess over a period of time. And that's the way that it's been designed to do, or that's what it's been designed to do that, or to do. Also, you can use it to monitor the progress, and so that's what I just spoke to, but you can kind of do it as you go. It's not meant to inform decisions as to whether a person's ready for work or should be hired for a particular job, but it is something that is useful to see, maybe readiness for a promotion. So that if there is working in a certain area, you could use that, are they ready to move into another level of programming that you have available. The other thing that I really liked about it, from my perspective, and the whole goal of it, is that you're using tasks, they're doing tasks that are authentic to the workplace. So it's an essential skill, so it's not, there's a difference between math essentials and academic math, right? I mean, who the heck's ever going to use what they use in academic? I hate to say that. In the real world, all the students will say, what the heck's that got to do with anything in the world of numbers? So I get that, and so that's a really daunting kind of thing for people. And so they're given for an example of a question might be that they're given a shipment form that's been received, and they have to translate that over, and they have to figure out, okay, well, if I receive these many items at this cost, what's the total cost of that? What would be the tax on that? What would be the shipping charge on that? And what would be the total cost? And so that's kind of it's a process of working through document use and through math and numeracy. It demonstrates their comprehension. So the learner is using different skills to actually answer the questions. And so that's really one of the things that I really liked most, because oftentimes in the work that we do, the questions that students are working with, the assignments they're working with, are very specific to that actual course. And so this way you get to kind of see how they can apply some of the learning that they have, or they're kind of what they come to you with originally, and then as they gain that new experience, how capable are they of actually applying that learning to the workplace and to a workplace type task. So I really like that.
So the next tool that we're talking about is the Employability Skills Assessment Tool, ESAT. A lot of you might be familiar with it. Andrea and I are each going to talk about it. I'll let Andrea go first.
Oh, thank you. We didn't practice, so we're not quite sure. Basically, just a general overview of the ESAT tool. What it is it's a combination of self-assessment, staff assessment, and notes about those soft skills that can be rather tricky to pin down in people. And it's a way of making something that can be seen as being quite objective a little less objective, I guess. So for example, the areas include stress management, teamwork, time management, accountability, adaptability, attitude, confidence, motivation, and presentation. So those, when you're looking at how do I assess those skills, this tool it's really great because it looks at not only how does the learner see themselves, but how it then compares how the learner sees themselves to how the staff working with that learner or how an employer working with that learner sees them as well. And it's really interesting to see those contrasts, and when you see that there's points on our little radar plot here where there's a lot of space between points, that's where the learner and the assessor are kind of seeing things a little bit differently. And it's an interesting way to sort of have those conversations with learners. And it's great because the ESAT tool itself, it's quite clearly defined, like there's verbal and physical indicators that really show you like this is what you're looking for and this is how you score in these certain areas. So I really, found it so far quite useful in the facility. The only issue I've had is time, because I think in the longer term, my problem is that the pilot project started and then a month and a half into the project, all of a sudden my correctional facility opened. So I didn't actually have candidates lined up. I didn't have people that were waiting to do this. I was sort of scrambling to find people and hopefully they work out and hopefully they're good candidates. So I've kind of always felt a little bit behind in everything I've done. But the ESAT tool so far has been great. The guys that I have picked really enjoyed going through. Although the only thing I guess I would say is like as much as I say it's just be honest about your self-assessment, how do you really feel, they all know what they think they should be clicking, I think. Like when you go through these little self-assessments, they would say that point blank, like, oh, well, I know what you want me to say, so I'm going to say it. I'm like, well, that might turn out to be a weird radar plot in the end, but we'll see. So I'm looking forward to actually finishing with ESAT. I haven't quite completed my assessments with the guys that I'm working with. Sorry, I got off my notes altogether here. Like I said, time is an issue for us right now. The other issue that I have, and it's unique to the correctional facilities, is that my students come to class where they live, which is kind of weird. So I see them on the units. I see them in other areas of their life because their life is contained within a correctional facility. So it's really a matter of I have to make sure that I'm sort of drawing that line, like how I see you behaving and acting, and your those indicators that I'm looking for those in the classroom, because I go onto the units where they live, and I need to try and separate those two, because most teachers don't go into the homes of their students and see how they live at home, right? So yeah, anyway, I'll leave it with Andre.
Sure, thanks, Andrea. So one thing you can see just by looking at the slide is how much of a visual progress report, I guess you can look at it, or an image of where their skills are, where they're viewed, like Andrea said, their own self-view as compared to what their instructors see them as. And I think that's one of the best features about the ESAT is this sort of radar plot. And I think that's one of the great things about the NACIS framework wheel, is that ideally a learner has this visual that they can easily interpret to communicate their employability skills. Now, ESAT does cover mostly the soft skills, the employment skills, but recently it's undergone a bit of a upgrade where they can be adjusted. So even though they're listed as presentation, teamwork, time management, motivation, accountability, adaptability, things like that, those different sections could, if we would like them to be altered to the middle circle of the NACIS wheel, so that it's the different sections of self-management versus, playing well with others or cooperating with others, or whatever the summary is that. Cooperating with others, there you go, playing with others. Now, I'll agree with Andrea. One of the things about administering ESAT, and to be honest, it could be part of the time frame of the pilot, is time and the time commitment. To get the most out of the ESAT radar tool, you want to be able to make notes periodically on the learners that are the participants who are taking part in the project. And for me, as a full-time instructor, finding the time to jot down these notes and implement them into the program, it's taken some adjustment. Now that being said, I don't think it's impossible, but I do think that a lot of these tools, and if the ROA project is to find life in the adult learning programs, we have to acknowledge that they need their own time for both assessments and for ongoing assessments like the notes needed for ESATs. Yeah, but I think it's super awesome, wickedly efficient, excellent, effective, and really could find a life within the ROA NACIS framework field.
I think the time thing too, I don't know about in your situation, but in my situation, like ESAT who's used ESAT? And is there a lot of, not many. Okay, so the notes thing that we're talking about, there's actually a function where you go in and you can create notes about all of these things that you observe. On this date, my student demonstrated good adaptability when class times got changed and we had to move to, you know what I mean? Like you can add that stuff in there so that it reminds you when you're doing your own assessments. And the issue that I'm having is that I am the team. Like there's just me doing it right now, and I'm not sure if do you have a team working?
Two.
You have two. So for me, it's been a matter of like, I feel bad when I don't get a lot of notes in for my guys, but in the future, I think once we become more of an established facility, like I said, we're in the process of, we're just trying to open and run a correctional facility, which isn't really a really easy thing to do. So programming sometimes takes a backseat to that. And I think in the future, it will be much easier when we have more people to contribute to those notes and to make their own assessments and whatnot about the people we're working with.
I'm just going to reiterate what was said earlier. I don't know if it was Michelle maybe that said it, but sometimes we have a lot of these tools that we're giving to our learners and the participants in this project. But ESAT was one of those, like the self-assessment is 50-some questions where they just have to be honest. They read it and they say, yes, I play well with others, or I keep my room clean. You know, those kinds of questions.
I rarely keep my room clean.
And they actually ask you to separate a distinction between home and work or home and school. And so maybe you get that little bit more honesty about, okay, maybe I curse a bit more at home, whereas at school or at work, I keep it under wraps. So that takes a little bit of the assessment anxiety away that they get from some of the numeracy assessment tools, or even the camera writing sections. And I have worked with a lot of newcomers, and the language was not heavy enough that they couldn't follow through. They might have needed a dictionary here and there, but they understood, for the most part, the questions that were asked of them. Yeah.
Is there any,
Questions?
do you want to hold
let's
questions?
hold on
Okay, we'll hold
questions.
questions and get through everything.
Oh, okay. Do you mind?
It's okay if you hold
Yeah, we
questions.
just had to finish. Yeah, we'll finish.
Keep them.
Keep them, write them down,
Yeah.
we'll answer them after.
So I'm going to stay here because I'm
Oh, yes,
talking
you're
about the
doing that.
numeracy tool. You don't have to, you can, it doesn't matter. There's no slide for the numeracy tool. Cara mentioned David Pilmer, I think it was Cara, or maybe it was Mary. But you guys should know David Pilmer now, if you know, and get your math on. He's a curriculum consultant at the Labor and Advanced Education for the math. He developed a numeracy tool specifically for the ROA. Now, the reason the numeracy tool needed to be developed was, even though there is numeracy and a numeracy element in the camera testing using that tool, it fell a little short on the measurement side. So if you remember the wheel that we talked about, numeracy or reasoning was split into 3 different categories. One of them was finances, and the camera assessment really does cover well with finances, as Michelle talked about, you know, find the percentage, find the taxes, adding up you know, the different prices, all of that is there. And there's a resource, resource managing your resources, so time management. That component is also present in the camera assessment, but what was lacking a little bit was measurement. And so David took it upon himself to do a numeracy tool, which actually included all of the sections, but what is, I think, a little bit most important is that measurement component. It was created with 3 levels, so there's a level 1, level 2, and level 3 where the questions get more difficult. But unlike the camera and the ESAT, the numeracy tool is yet to be validated. The camera and ESAT tests have been validated. They've been used in a lot of different contexts. They're recognized nationwide. The numeracy tool was locally developed. It just got developed for this ROA pilot, so we're still seeing exactly how to fit it in. It can be lengthy if you look at it in its entirety, and here students do all levels of every 3 sections all at once. It's like, too much math. But it can be managed, you know, 1 section at a time. Starting off at level 1 is a nice place to start off, and then, like the camera, placement is a great place to start off, and you see where they are a little bit, and if you should jump to level 2 or level 3, or if they need extra numeracy assessing in a particular area, whether it be measurement or finance or time and resource management. They get that number sense. Now the number sense can be found in any of those 3 categories, but they get a little bit more than they would if the camera tool assessment was the only thing that was used. From my experience, I'm a math instructor, so I paid a little bit more close attention to the numeracy aspects. For the most part, regardless of where our students were, whether they were international learners or if they were Canadian-born citizens, levels 2 or 3, finances was always the trickiest area. I don't know if that's maybe, but I guess we'll find out on June 1st. But that was one area that, whether it was in the camera placement that they were being assessed, or in David Pilmer's numeracy, the finance section fell a little short. And obviously that's an important employability tool. So it's something that we'll have to maybe in our programming look a little bit closer at. I think that's all for the numeracy tool. And if you have any questions, hold on to it.
So I'm just going to address the recognition of prior learning tools or methods, maybe would be another word that we could use. And that's really, it really comes down to a progressive way to guide adult learners towards a better understanding of the skills and knowledge that they're bringing to the table. And so, in the world of work. And often adult learners, we find, rank their skills quite low, as you've probably heard in many of the stories that you've heard this morning. And sometimes they rank them quite high, so it can go the other way as well. So we've certainly experienced both. So I'm just going to do a brief outline of some of the methods that we can use in RPL. And again, because it's a pilot, we're in various stages of this with our learners. And we were mentioning earlier, we were very impacted, at least our program was impacted by the number of storms that happened this year in terms of just even getting students in to the program. So I think everyone's feeling a bit rushed right now with all of this. But so some of the methods used are obviously the self-assessments, where the learners are assessing their own skills against the core employability skills criteria that we sort of outline for them, and they kind of estimate where they feel they might be on that spectrum. And it's based on their experience and their habits, and of course, not sufficient on its own. So then we have also that semi-structured discussion with the students, which is really open-ended questioning and prompting to explore their skills and learning. I hesitate to use the word claims, but sort of their feeling of where they're at. And just really drawing out specific skills based on their work experience or their volunteerism, their leisure, their family lives. Sometimes we have students who don't recognize, as mentioned before, that they've actually been working, and maybe they've done a lot of volunteer work. We did have a woman who sat on a board of directors for 13 years, but didn't equate that either with volunteerism or with working. So there's just that, it's amazing what you can draw out of people and recognize when you have those discussions with them. And observation, of course, the observation of the assessor and the observation of the other instructors, which is, ESAT is wonderful for that. So, but just in general, just having those conversations. And then show and tell, demonstration, learners getting to actually demonstrate and show some of the completed work that they've done, some of the projects that they've participated in. They may be, bringing in photographs of projects they finished. I had one guy bring me in a model of a house that he built based on a picture I'd given him, and it was my mother's house that he built in a popsicle stick. So that was pretty amazing. And just assignments that they've done, activities they've participated in, those kinds of things. And haircuts. I mean, they can do just about anything to demonstrate. Document collection. So sort of learning what contributes as evidence, what's important. Collecting documents related to their accomplishments or course completions, that kind of thing, letters of validation, just basically validating from an employer or a volunteer situation that they've actually, these are the skills they've demonstrated in the workplace or in volunteer work. And of course, the standardized testing that people have spoken with earlier, also very, very important. So there is a triangulation of evidence that goes with that. So there's the self-evidence piece, what the candidate says about their own skills, knowledge, and attributes. So they may do a bit of reflective writing, they may do some self-assessments, those kinds of things. that indirect, or the direct evidence, so sort of that primary evidence piece. So the work samples, the items they produce or build, and then that indirect secondary evidence, what others say or observe, letters, those kinds of things that they bring to the table. So hopefully that covers it.
Okay, so we have quickly, maybe we could just talk about assessor experience and learner experience, and then we'll.
Okay, so obviously for me as an assessor, there's been a huge learning curve. I've learned lots, and I've really loved learning the new tools, the camera and the ESAT, and participating in the numeracy assessments and the whole process. I've indicated, I think there's the learning curve, between the learning curve and, you know, it's kind of some of those cancellations that we've had to endure, students just not being able to make it in because of the weather, and we have one student who's visually impaired. She's not part of this project, but she's a good example of, I think, what people do go through, is people trying to navigate. Anybody who's got any kind of a disability is basically trapped in their homes, or has been for most of the winter. So it's been, those kinds of challenges have been quite strong. But what I really enjoy is seeing the faces of the students light up as they recognize and begin to discover themselves. And we had one student, one component of our program is trying to encourage volunteerism, and that's kind of that community connection part. So we did have what we call a Moving On Up conference, which was an interagency thing the other day, and we had the employment readiness class there as volunteers. And one of the young guys who is participating in this project, in the pilot, when he self-assessed, had indicated that his social skills were really low and that talking to people was a real issue for him. But what he demonstrated through the volunteer work he did was the complete opposite. So when we debriefed on that afterwards, he was completely like, I had no idea that I could do that, or that was something in me. Maybe when I'm at work, and he does do seasonal work, he said, maybe I'll try talking to the other guys, not something he's ever done before. So just that revelation to himself that, you know, maybe I'm better at some parts of this than I ever knew. So I think that experience makes the record of achievement pretty interesting. Do I need to go on with that? Okay. Thanks, Kat. Okay.
So I'm just going to talk really short because we're running out of time, but assessor's experience, I found the experience invaluable. The way they're training assessors, the ROA project is really giving us the tools that can help us implement that employment readiness aspect to our programs. Myself, we're the adult learning program. I've been very pleased with all of the assessment tools and the amount of training that we've gotten from it. I think it does provide the participant with the ability to better communicate what skills they have at any given point. And that's the feedback I've been getting from the learners as well. Most of them were like, this is a little weird, didn't understand all these different assessments at first. It was a little confusing, a lot of things coming from different places. But as we went on, they got the hang and they understood. And I think when we finish up and develop the action plan and they see the record of what they've done and they have the conversation with us, they're really going to have a better sense of how to communicate their skills that they have gained to potential employers. So I'll just look at that.
Rapid fire.
That's right.
So Andre mentioned some of his students were feeling like, oh, it's a little weird, and what are all these? I kind of felt the same way when I first started with the ROA, I will fully admit. This was my first pilot project. Some people had been on the project previous to this, like other pilots. However, since the beginning, things have definitely come into focus a lot more. I'm really looking forward, and so are my students, looking forward to sort of that end result and seeing how all of these things that they've been working on are going to fit together. Again, I'm going to echo Andre that great tools, great training that we've had. It's been amazing, even for outside of the ROA, to get this training has been fantastic. My students, again, with the weird facility that I work in, time is always an issue. We have other things that come up, not so much snowstorms, but things like lockdowns and transfers. And you laugh, but this is a daily occurrence. So those sort of things are what I have been competing with. And just having, and as I said in my opening little statement there where Ken had said, a lot of these guys just, they don't have a lot of self-worth, self-esteem. I mean, they're participating in this program from jail. Like, you know, that in itself is kind of it's a hard look at yourself, I guess, when you're in that situation. But you know what's great is seeing these guys who come in and they say to me, you know what, oh, it's a math assessment? Oh, I suck at math, I can't do math. And then they make it through, you know, and they're doing really well in these level 3 assessments. And they go, oh, wow, I didn't think I could do that, you know, and I think it's a testament to the difference, like it's a numeracy assessment. It's like these useful, functional tools that we use in everyday life as opposed to, you know, academic. Sorry, I'm more academic. Always picking on the math guy. But in general, it's been a fantastic experience, and I apologize to the NSCC folks because, again, time frame. I feel like I'm always running and rushing to catch up on stuff, but I promise it's like I'm doing it. Trying. So I just want to say thank you to these guys. They've been great.
And I won't talk long, but I just do want to say how neat it is for us to be able to look at. We think we always are trying to think about employability skills and soft skills and things that employers are looking for when we're delivering the academics at the level that we work with. However, some of these tools that we've been introduced to really highlight how we can do that. And we're going to begin to do that. So we're going to try to embed, even if you know, we're not going to have everybody sign up for an ROA project or pilot necessarily, but we are going to be actually able to extract some of the things that we've learned and embed them into our some of the courses that we offer in the transition for example, or career skills, things that actually look at you know, the self-assessment part of ESAT is so really incredibly valuable as the learner clicks on, well, I guess I'm kind of that. Well, yeah, okay, and then it makes them look at, oh, those are things that people are observing and are interested in knowing about me, so maybe I need to work on those areas and maybe I'm really good at these much better than I thought. So thanks.
Well, thanks so much. I'm going to keep it short. The only other thing that I wanted to talk about quickly before we open up to questions is that we're also, we're working on so all the learners will be issued a skills record, a Nova Scotia skills record. They won't be issued an ROA certification, but what they will be issued is a skills record, which basically is a abridged and informal version of the ROA. It's not signed by the minister, but it's still a summary of demonstrated skills. And that's what they'll get. And a brief description of the skills assessed. So that's what learners will get at the end of this program. And then finally, before we talk about next steps, we are developing ideal ROA profiles with employers that basically take on the same shape as the skills record, so that you're able to match a competency-based job description that you develop with an employer, talking about the actual skills that are needed to do each and every job. For example, housekeeping within the Capital Health System. We're working with the Nova Scotia boat builders, so fiber reinforced plastics, building boats, fishing boats. And we're also working with the Atlantic home builders. So we're building these competency-based profiles that match, using the NSC's framework as the underlying structure, the standards and the performance indicators that you saw. And what we're trying to do is develop these profiles so that they match what learners are coming out with on the other side of the ROA. So eventually what we hope to see is a system that works so you can match your ideal ROA profile, the job descriptions you see coming from employers, with the ROAs that you see at the other end of assessment process. And so that's theoretically what we're aiming to do. And so I just wanted to let you know that.